David Gouthro, another episode of Discover Fresh Perspectives. And are we ever going to discover some today? I have the pleasure of having as a guest Lisa Lounsbury coming to us today from Costa Rica. And Lisa is going to, well, what we're going to do is explore menopause and just all kinds of different aspects of that. But first, Lisa, welcome. And maybe just so the listeners understand sort of the context that you're coming at this from, could you just tell us a little bit about you and the majority of your work that you do, and then we'll dive into menopause specifically.
For sure, David, and thanks for having me. And I'm thrilled to be talking about something that I think is groundbreaking. And my background is in health and wellness. I've been in the industry for 35 years now. And my passion has always been to inspire people to make wellness a priority. And that has evolved over the years. And as I've entered the menopausal transition, being 57, I realized there was nothing that I wasn't prepared for what we're going to talk about. And I know a lot of men don't understand this transition. So I think it's a vital and a great link to what I already do and inspiring people to make health a priority, making wellness a priority. So we really need to understand this thing called menopause. It's taboo, and the stigma around it is something we need to break down. So that's in a nutshell, my background.
Super. So I'm very interested in this because obviously being a male, my experience or knowledge of menopause is secondhand, and in truth, it's probably about eighth or ninth hand, and I have no idea what's true, what's out there, what's a myth, what's not. And I also understand that you are a certified menopause coach. Is that correct?
It is correct. And I wanted to have that credential to be able to offer the respect, the trust, because there's a lot of misinformation out there and there's a lot of fear. So I wanted to make sure that I came at a point of knowing what I'm talking about and the trust and the respect that I'm doing the right thing, I'm saying the right thing.
Very cool. So let's just start really basic. So, what is menopause?
Wow, it's kind of like we all go through puberty in our teenage years, male and females. We go through puberty. Everybody seems to understand it. We learn about it in school. And then there's the forgotten years of when women are now in the childbearing years, where we do our thing, we're making other humans, we're doing our thing, we're supporting the family, and the men are by our sides and they're doing their best to support us. And then we go into another transition, which is menopause. So after childbearing years, our bodies are now focusing more on the kind of the exit point. We're no longer able to bear children, and now our bodies are shifting into the latter part of our life. And that is the part that we don't learn in school. That's the part that we don't get educated on. That's the part we're not understanding. But it's also the part that is being very disruptive
Hmm.
to our lives, both men and women. So it's something that we have to uncover and talk about.
And so, can you like what are some of the changes? Like, everything I hear is like eighth hand, and usually I hear
Yeah.
from some of my colleagues about how disruptive it is, or my female friends about how people don't get it and things like that. But what are the changes that a person goes through, and are they strictly physical, or are there other aspects of the changes?
And David, I really respect your questionings and being open and honest because we shouldn't pretend we know what this is about. So don't worry if this was eighth generation or eighth, whatever you want to call it, your information. I'm going to give you firsthand information.
Please.
So what happens is, as women, we grow, we have this big bank of estrogen, and it's basically the estrogen levels that are changing. And when we joke about our moods and that we're going crazy, and my wife has PMS, our moods and our body are so intertwined with our hormones that you can't appreciate the impact it has. So as women age, our estrogen that are really, really high, it's highest when we're at childbearing years. Suddenly, after the age of 40, it just plummets. The estrogen basically disappears. So our bodies are relying on this estrogen for every cell of our body. It
Hmm.
impacts our mind, our organs, our muscles, our joints, everything. It's not just about hot flashes. So if you can appreciate the things that are happening to our bodies, we're changing, our health is changing. We're at higher risk of a lot of chronic illnesses like cardiovascular health.
Huh.
So it's not just about hot flashes and getting moody.
Wow. My gosh. So, so what are some myths that people hold about menopause, or what are some myths that you have heard that men hold about menopause?
One of the biggest myths is we feel like we've been put out to pasture, we've dried up, we're no good to society, we're old, and we kind of get tossed to the curb. So a lot of women don't want to talk about menopause or accept that this is part of our aging process because of how society has treated it. And it's not about aging. It's just like I said, it's about puberty. It's just another transition in our lives. And men actually go through a similar drop in sex hormones. It's just so gradual that it doesn't cause as much havoc. So all the attention is put on the woman that seems to be going crazy and is moody and is uncomfortable and is having hot flashes when it's more than just that.
So, you mentioned that you work a lot in industry, and I know that you've been in Sudbury and worked with mining companies and things like that. And health is safety is so incredibly important. What do health officers, safety officers, who are quite often men, need to know about the impact of menopause as it might have an impact on safety?
It absolutely has an impact. And what I think is happening is because women have been hiding our symptoms. There's over 70 symptoms of menopause. You can't even imagine what's going on in our bodies. Not every woman experiences all these symptoms, but collectively, there can be that many. So if a woman is going to work and safety is top priority, you can imagine that the risk or the difficulty. So brain fog is something that's very common.
Hmm.
Those hot flashes, those aches and pains, the fear of being ousted from other colleagues. So we've been hiding these symptoms for so many years. When if we would reach out and talk to the men and all their colleagues and explain what's happening so they understand that this is not a choice, this is just part of our being, and that we can support each other and have a safer day when we understand. So if women start to feel respected and feel less alone, maybe we could say, Joe, today I could really appreciate it if you would help me, change the temperature of this room, or take this safety talk for me because at the moment I'm struggling with my brain fog. And when we are actually honest with these symptoms, what I have found is men are typically very compassionate
Mhm.
and want to learn more and want to help. My first major hot flash was actually working with a bunch of group of mining workers, and I was doing some mental health training. And it was the first time in public that this happened to me. And it was like, what's happening to my body and my brain? I just froze. Well, it was kind of funny. I was having a hot flash, but I froze. Um, and when they looked at me, we're 10 minutes into the training. They're like, Lisa, are you okay? And I'm like, I think so, but I'm sorry. I'm having my first public hot flash. I was so embarrassed. Luckily, all the men in the room said, "Oh, Lisa, don't worry about it. My wife has this
Yeah.
all the time.
Mhm.
Oh, I heard about my mom. Can I get you a fan? Can I get you a glass of water?" They were so compassionate and so patient with me. And then I let down my fear and I started to thrive in my role as a facilitator and let down those
Mhm.
guards.
That's very cool, but what it makes me think about is that it's one thing if men are married and know someone that's gone through that. For someone who's younger, like there's a lot of younger people in the workplace and a lot are
Mm.
becoming managers and things like that. What recommendations or advice could you give to a man who is his doesn't remember talking about this with his mother and isn't married or has a wife that's gone through that? Like what kind of awareness can you build for those that haven't had an experience of it that might not automatically be as empathic or empathetic or sympathetic because they've seen it before? Like
Right?
how can we get them to be aware of that sooner?
Well, I can guarantee most men of any generation have not had this conversation with their mother.
Mhm.
Pretty much guaranteed that's a high percentage. So for those guys or gals, I think when we help show them the science or the biology around it, they kind of have a like they're like, oh, I understand now. I understand why. Because I work with a lot of engineers, a lot of scientists, a lot of men, and they often want to know why. Okay, I get it, I see it, I hear it,
Mhm.
but explain to me why. I want the science behind it. And I think that's great proof and great evidence that this is something that's real. It's not just inside of our heads that we're making this up and or we're looking for sympathy.
So, okay. So there's so many things I'm curious about. So just diving back to something you said a little bit earlier about 70 different changes. Can you give, I mean, not a list of all 70, but can you give examples, some things that can happen that people might be pretty unaware of?
One of the things that I wasn't aware of until it happened to me was this extreme ache in our bones and joints because I'm very active, I'm very healthy. I do all the things I think are good for your well-being, but the pain of my entire body just hit me like a tidal wave. And I didn't link it to the lack of estrogen until I did the
Oh,
research and started to actually start on hormone replacement therapy.
mhm.
That was one big one. Sleep is disrupted. We hear about hot flashes, but brain fog, cognitive, it's not really cognitive decline in a sense, but it certainly feels like it. So can you imagine being in a career where you've worked hard to be successful, only to lose your words and forget things and not be able to focus? That's devastating to anybody. And it's often not linked to menopause.
And is that a permanent state, Lisa, or is that something that you adjust to, or?
So ironically, there's three top killers of women. One is cardiac heart health. Women are dying of cardiac health. One is cognitive dementia and Alzheimer's. More women are affected by dementia and Alzheimer's.
Mhm.
We'll focus on those two. So those are the science is highly suggesting the lack of estrogen is linked to just those two chronic illnesses, which is devastating. So we really have to realize this is more than just hot flashes and a moody lake. This is now our future life, our lifespan, um, our our I'm trying to think of the right word, but our not our demise, but it doesn't have to be permanent, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
So if we can understand the impact of replacing the estrogen in our body that has been lost, we will reverse or at least prevent it from getting worse. So it's ironic that the top two killers of women are cardiac and brain health, but the two top solutions that estrogen helps is cardiac and brain health. So it's not just a temporary situation here.
So I have of other questions, and I'm hoping not the only person that does know the answer to this question. But so do men have estrogen?
You have a small amount, just like we have a small amount of testosterone.
And so I don't expect you to be a physician to answer this way, but I'm curious. So does should men take, like, I know some men, for things like addressing enlarged prostate, there's a hormone that you can take, but it can have consequences, like you start to have more breast development, things like that. So I'm
Mm-hmm,
assuming it's a
mm-hmm,
female hormone. I don't,
mm-hmm.
don't have direct experience with that, but I've heard about that. And is estrogen something that everyone should be taking? And I also hear about bioequivalent estrogen. Is that a thing, or am I making that up?
Bioide- Bioidentical,
So yeah, something like that.
I
So
think
is
might be.
that something that we should, like, all be taking to avoid these things if there are those connections?
So this is really important to understand. Women lose a significant amount of estrogen. It almost falls off the map, and they need to replace it with progesterone and estrogen. We have a small amount of testosterone that we also lose, that women are afraid to investigate to maybe have that replaced. On the flip side, since men do experience a form of menopause, it's the lack of testosterone. No, men should not be taking any extra estrogen. I am not a doctor, but from the research that I've read, you do not require um, a replacement of estrogen. However, with a blood test, you may be, you may require, and this is quite common, some testosterone replacements for men. And actually, I'm in Costa Rica right now, and it's the medical community is very open to talking about menopause, doing the blood work. I can actually get further in my care here than back home in Canada.
Interesting.
So I'm getting my blood work, I'm getting all of my sex hormones tested, and I'm even getting my husband's testosterone tested, which is huge because back home he wouldn't be open to this discussion. But now we're starting to uncover that, yeah, you know what? Men do experience a decline. There's muscle loss, there is a little bit of brain fog, there's fatigue. Our sex hormones are also impacting our libido, and that affects both men and women. So although women's menopause is much more dramatic, we can't leave out the men.
I feel included. It's part of a little DEI going on here. So, I'm when does menopause hit? Like, is there a time when, we guys should be more aware of it? Like, is what's considered early, what's considered late?
This is a great question, David, because there's a start to menopause. It's called perimenopause.
Mhm.
That is going undiagnosed by most women. So perimenopause can start, it's kind of depending on the woman's menstrual cycle, but usually around 40 is just a general age. Women's estrogen starts to decline. That's when these changes start to happen. But we don't, at 40, you're not really thinking about menopause because you still feel pretty young. You're still kind of, taking care of your younger children. So the symptoms are sneaking up and we're not linking it directly to menopause. So a lot of women aren't seeking out hormone replacement therapy in their 40s, even though they will probably benefit if it's safe for them. And so partners or men in their lives, whether you're working with a woman or you're married to one or you're a father to one, this is good to know. And you don't want to out them going, oh, I think you're going through menopause because you're going to get a punch in the face. But you might want to be empathetic and going, you know what, honey, I'm noticing, A, B, and C. I notice you're struggling. How is this making you feel? Have you ever thought of talking to your doctor about perimenopause?
So that's actually leading into one of the questions I was going to ask was, how do you enter into that conversation? Because like my I would be afraid that if I asked the question, like you said, someone's going to be, and just,
Mhm.
all that emotion comes forward. But I think being afraid to have the conversation isn't good either. So, how do you, I don't know if there's one answer to this, Lisa, but how would one enter into a conversation with one's spouse? That's one question. But then when you're an employer and you're employing women, like, I don't know what the laws are and things about asking about these kinds of things. It sounds like it's pretty important for a whole pile of different reasons, but are there any
Mhm.
guidelines about, first of all, whether to do it? And if so, how to go about doing it?
I can, I empathize with this question because it is scary for a man or someone not understand. How do you bring up this conversation without, getting slapped in their face or,
Mhm.
getting someone upset? What I can tell you now is at this point, I want to empower women to first get educated,
Okay.
to first understand, to first start getting a handle on this. It's
Mhm.
not anybody else's job to make this a priority except for the person going through it. That's number one. We can't expect our male partners, colleagues to even enter the conversation until we have a handle on it because it's not going to be a good conversation. It's not going to play out well. There's going to be animosity, there's going to be anger, there's going to be tears, there's going to be fear. So women, figure this out, seek help, get the education, and then we have to allow our curious male colleagues and friends and family to ask the questions without making them feel that they're stupid, uneducated, unempathetic. Like allow them to be curious, allow them to
Mhm.
say stupid things because, well, they're not really stupid, but they're uneducated things because we have to give you compassion that we have so many years to make up for this lack of education that we have to be compassionate for folks like you who just don't know, and that needs to be okay. We can't just get very upset and pissed off because you don't get it.
And one of my niggling concerns is, what's going on in the United States currently about women's rights and things like this. And, that could also be, create a lot more hesitancy to talk about these sorts of things, given, what's in the public right now that I think is quite tragic. I hope that isn't the case, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's some influence that makes it more awkward or people reluctant to talk about these things.
I'm heartbroken at that as well, David, but I'm also encouraged because we can't let politics influence how we take care of our bodies. We still have full control of our own bodies and our relationships with people who we love and who care about us. So I don't want people to be afraid to bring up these discussions.
Mhm.
I want men and women who aren't familiar with menopause to ask the hard questions. And I want us as women to be empowered to have the answers. So there's a lot of education out there now. Finally,
Mhm.
our generation, my generation, is speaking out. So 20 years ago, this was not on anyone's mind to talk about. And the research and the information that it was kind of hidden. There was a lot of information that was hidden. So now the truth is coming out and we're starting to understand this. So now we have the education to have conversations. And I want men to ask these questions. I want you to be curious because it shows that you care and you
So
want to be empathetic.
then this may be putting you on the spot, but what are some questions that you think I should be curious about that I haven't asked yet?
I love that you're curious about this because this is what I'm trying to do. I'm working to promote this transition in a health and safety world where health is just starting to be spoke of in health and safety conversations, not let alone menopause. I'm bringing this up to men probably in their 60s for the first time, and I could just see their faces. They're like, what? The fear in their eyes and their face proves to me that we have some work to do. And I think we have to be compassionate especially for me, as I ease into offering this topic in a male dominated environment. I need to come at it with compassion and empathy, not just you need to understand and we've been misread and misguided and wow. And instead of making us feel like we're the victims, I want us to empower ourselves to educate everybody else instead of feeling like it's our demise and we're doing this all by ourselves.
So, some of us, well, you and I are both members of the same association, Canadian Association of Professional Speakers, and I mean, a lot of people who listen are not. But one of the things at our association, remember, it was in 2012 at the CAPS convention in Winnipeg, that we had on stage a number of folks talking about mental health, which was dramatically different because, speakers, all rah, rah, everyone's up, 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 up. We had some very well-known speakers who'd been dealing with depression and things like that. And it opened up conversations that had not happened and probably needed to be happening for many, many years. And I'm just thinking that maybe something like this could be of the same nature in our association or others, that to have these conversations. How does menopause have an impact on a professional speaker or on the association or people that are supporting them? What happens if you go on stage and you're having one of those moments, like all of a sudden brain fog hits, and how do you as a speaker deal with that? So uh, I'm actually going to recommend that be considered, because I do think well, it's something that all women go through, right? And as a professional, where you have to be perfect all the time, maybe it's time that we can have more of these types of conversations.
You know what, David? I actually proposed that very topic to the CAPS convention for this year, and it wasn't chosen. And I think it wasn't chosen because possibly the perception was, well, this conversation's only valuable for the women. The men in the room aren't going to really want to join in on this conversation. Do you feel it?
Just a little bit. Just kind of feeling the hackles rise on my back, especially based on this conversation. Well, I hope that's not going to keep you from submitting it for the Halifax convention.
I'm going to keep submitting it because it has a huge impact. Like, David, you're having this first conversation, and I could feel your curiosity and your compassion, and you're trying to understand this. So when I'm talking about menopause, it's not a women's issue,
Right.
it's society's issue.
Yes.
So the sooner we get
Mm.
that, we wrap our head around that, the sooner we can make this as normal as mental health discussions are.
So I shouldn't be giving this advice because I don't know if it's valid, but one of the things to consider is possibly recommending a panel that's a mixed panel of men and women to talk about this.
Love it. Yeah.
Right.
So I'm starting to talk to more CAPS members, male CAPS members, and asking them, are you interested in talking about this or learning about this? And it's a resounding yes. So I know we're ready.
Well, if I can help with, putting a little survey on that, make it a little more formal, I'd be happy to help with that, Lisa. One last question is, what are some myths about menopause?
We talked about the stigma around it being an aging thing, like we're kind of old and we're kind of over it. And that's something I don't want women to feel like you're afraid to use the word menopause because it means you're getting old. We're all getting old, and that's a blessing. That's a gift to get old. And we have to learn to just say this is to trust this is just the next transition, and we get to thrive at this part of our lives. But one of the myths that I also want to bring up is the risk or the fear, the dangers of hormone replacement therapy, HRT. One study, through the Women's Health Initiative revealed incorrectly that estrogen causes breast cancer. And it just shut down the whole industry of supporting women through hormone replacement therapy. So for 20 years, women have been suffering needlessly because doctors weren't able to prescribe the therapy or the hormone replacement because of the fear of this one study.
Mm.
And it's been revealed that it was improperly forecasted and the statistics weren't accurate. So that is a myth we have to wrap our head around. So do some research, advocate, talk to your doctors. We have to educate even our doctors and understand that hormone replacement therapy is not a huge health risk. There's more positive outcomes as there are risks.
Like this is a topic for a different conversation when I say this, but people grab onto something that's negative and ascribe truth to it much more quickly than something's positive. And I just think of, the damage that COVID-19 causes autism and how many people grabbed onto that and didn't listen to anything else. And this could be somewhat similar. So this has been. Well, oh no, there's one other thing I wanted to say that menopause is not a career death sentence. Far from it. I have so many friends that they've gone through menopause, and a little later in life, they are taking on the flipping world. I mean, they're just
Mhm.
like right out there with all this energy and wisdom and things like that. And I think if people were to think of that's on the other side of menopause rather than
Mhm.
that's all gone once you hit menopause,
Mhm.
how much better we'd all be off.
It's amazing, David, you said that because I think when women actually figure this out and conquer the symptoms that we're receiving, we have so much more power and confidence. I made it through this challenge and look at me now. I am thriving. I am helping others. I have confidence. I am wiser and look at me go. And we're only, we're still young in terms of how many more years we have left. So we
Yeah.
can't let this be our demise.
So it's been very informative. It's also very exciting for me, and I'm so glad that we had an opportunity to talk about this and you're willing to go for it because I know that wasn't originally what we thought we would talk about. So I think this is just fabulous. So Lisa Lounsbury, I'd like to thank you so much for being here with us today. And listeners out there, I hope that you share this, whether you're male or female, with people that you think may be living a little bit in the dark about this natural phenomena of nature. And who knows what we're going to be listening to next week, but the best way to find out is to come on out and subscribe. So thank you once again.